This is Nick from ReVenture Consulting, back for another ReVenture YouTube cast. Today we're going to take a look at Austin, Texas's real estate market. Austin is one of the fastest growing cities in the US. In fact, it led the nation in household growth over the last 15 years. The city has a growing economy with lots of corporate relocations, a booming tech scene, and a really high quality of life. I actually moved to Austin a little over 2 months ago, so I can vouch for a lot of those things. But how does all that affect Austin's real estate market? Today, we're going to take a look at how the cost of owning a home in Austin compares to the rest of the US, and also look at how the growth rate in Austin home values compares over the last 10 years. From there, we're going to look at the zip codes within Austin that have seen the most growth and try to predict where might that growth be heading over the next 5 to 10 years. Let's dive into the numbers. So let's start by establishing some context. The average home price across the 100 largest cities in the US is about $288,000. But there's a lot of variation within that average. Youngstown, Ohio is the cheapest place to own a home in the US with an average price of $104,000. Some of the other cheapest places in the US are similar type of Midwest Rust Belt type towns like Scranton, Pennsylvania, Toledo, Ohio, as well as Dayton, Ohio. Austin ranks towards the top of this list. The average home price in Austin is $357,000. That's about $70,000 higher than the US average of $288,000. And it's about $250,000 higher than the cheapest place, Youngstown, Ohio. Some of the cities that are around Austin include Provo, Utah, Ogden, Utah, Boise, Idaho, and Stockton, California. Scrolling up further on this list, you can see the most expensive cities are almost universally in California. San Jose, San Francisco both have average values over $1 million, which is crazy. Los Angeles comes in at $700,000, Honolulu at $700,000, San Diego at $650,000. So while Austin is certainly above average, it's in the top 20, its $357,000 is nowhere close to the lack of affordability evident in some of the coastal markets in the US. And in fact, its $357,000 cost is pretty affordable relative to the economic prospects the city offers. If you look at some of these cities around Austin, the fact that Boise has a similar home value price when it's an economy that's about half the size and doesn't have nearly as much tech growth is pretty impressive. What that means is that very few people would be priced out of Austin right now, which is great for the city's growth. It can continue adding jobs and population and demand at a feverish pace, which is good for home value appreciation into the future. But how has Austin's home value appreciation looked the last 10 years? Once again, we're going to start at the bottom and work our way up. So the average home in the US across the 100 largest cities increased by 47% in value over the last 10 years, from 2010 to 2020. 47% is the US average. The cities towards the bottom, New Haven, Connecticut, Hartford, Connecticut, and Stamford, Connecticut, had roughly no change in value, close to 0%. Let's scroll up and see where we can find Austin on this list. Along the way, you can see Philadelphia, Pennsylvania at 14% growth, Chicago at 18% growth, DC at 33% growth, Boston at 44% growth. Now we're approaching the US average. LA, 64%, Atlanta, 65%, Nashville, 67%. And here we find Austin at 70% growth. So the average home in Austin was $210,000 in 2010. And now it's priced on average $357,000. That's almost $150,000 in equity gained from anyone that owned a home 10 years ago, or the average homeowner 10 years ago. That's very impressive. So Austin's 70% growth rate is in the top quarter of cities in the US. Let's dig further into how Austin's growth compares to the rest of Texas. This map shows home value growth by metro area. The redder the metro area looks, the higher the growth. The bluer it looks, the lower the growth. Austin ranks second at 70% next to Dallas's 75% growth over the last 10 years. But what I know people in Austin care about is understanding where the growth is within the metro area. This map shows home value growth by zip code. Once again, the redder shaded the cell, the higher the home value growth. The more gray the cell is, or the bluer it looks, the lower the home value growth. What you'll notice, though, is that pretty much this entire map is red, meaning that if you bought anywhere in Austin in 2010, you beat the U.S. housing market in appreciation. Pretty much every zip code in Austin appreciated above the U.S. average of 47%. But maybe it's a bit boring to just say, wow, you could have bought anywhere in the city and done well. Where would you have done exceptionally well if you bought in 2010? In fact, what are the zip codes where home values have more than doubled over the last 10 years? Now, that would be interesting to look at. Let's set the filter to 100% growth, which is basically doubling. And here we go. Now we're left with 9 zip codes whose value has gone up by more than 100% in the last 10 years. That is, value has more than doubled in the last 10 years. Let's zoom in on these zip codes and see what they're all about. Here we have 78727, the furthest north zip code, whose value has gone from 197,000 to 397,000. That's a $200,000 value increase. So if you bought a home in this area 10 years ago, your equity and net worth went up by 200,000 just from owning this home. It's adjacent to 78758. This zip code is well known for housing the Domain, a master plan development that you can see right here. The Domain has a lot of new office buildings for Austin's tech companies, a lot of new apartments, and a lot of new retail. All of that development, which has occurred over the last 10 years, is driving the home values for the residential areas on the east side. Moving further down, we can go to 78752. This zip code's average value has gone up from 178,000 to 385,000, a 116% increase. It's adjacent to 78723. 78723 is perhaps best known for another master plan development, the Mueller District, which you can see right here. The Mueller District, like the Domain, is combining offices, housing, and retail to make a live, work, play atmosphere. The Mueller District is definitely driving a lot of the 114% value growth that this zip code has seen, with average values going from 205,000 to 438,000, over 230,000 of equity increase. Then we move down to 78721. This is actually the fastest growing zip code in Austin the last 10 years. 138% growth. Values from 157,000 to 374. When I talk to locals, some people view this area as still somewhat undiscovered. However, given its surging growth rates, that's definitely not the case. If you can buy in this area now, do it. Then we have 78702. This is the traditional zip code for East Austin, especially the development that we've seen in East Austin along Cesar Chavez Boulevard, as well as 5th and 6th Streets. There's been lots of new apartment buildings, bars, and restaurants that have cropped up in this area, and the result has been an increase in home value from 221,000 to 493,000 over the last 10 years. That $270,000 equity increase is actually the highest nominal amount of any zip code in Austin. So 78721, that's the highest percentage increase. 78702, that's the highest raw dollar increase. Moving further south, you have 78741. This is the neighborhood of Riverside and Montopolis. There was a big Oracle campus installed in this area about 2 years ago, and a lot of corresponding apartment and retail development around it. The result is that values went from 161,000 to 335 in this area. Moving east, there's 78742. This is an interesting zip code. There's actually very few homes. You can see it's mostly bodies of water and undeveloped land. There's some homes down here and over here. It'll be interesting to see going forward what happens with this area. I imagine it's going to get more developed in the future. Then, last but not least, we have 78745. This zip code south of the river has seen over 100% growth over the last 10 years, going from 185,000 to 374,000. Now, I know what you're wondering. 10 years is a great sample size for understanding long-term growth. But what about the more recent time period? What about over the last 1 year? Has any of this shifted? This map looks at home value change over the last 1 year rather than 10. The biggest difference you can see is that there's a lot more blue on this map than there was before, meaning that there's a lot more zip codes that are trailing the U.S. average growth rate in Austin over the last 1 year than over the last 10. Particularly, it's these rural regions in Bastrop County to the east, Williamson County to the north, and Caldwell County to the south. Over the last year, it's really been zip codes in the urban core of the city which have seen the highest growth rates. In fact, it's a lot of the same zip codes that we just looked at. Now, an interesting question is, what will this map look like 5 years from now? Are we going to see the same zip codes that we've been talking about thus far dominate the value growth list? Or are some new ones going to take over? Could we see 78725 and 78617 based on their proximity to the city as well as to, say, the new Tesla Gigafactory? Could they see a lot of growth going forward? What about 78744 and 78747? These zip codes are fairly rural, but are right along 35 and can get to downtown in 20 minutes. Are we going to see these zip codes grow a lot over the next 5 to 10 years? I think those are probably good bets. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. I think any way you slice it, Austin is a great market to own real estate in. There's probably going to be a lot of appreciation going forward over the next 5 to 10 years as it cements itself as the top growing city in the United States. I'd love for you guys to leave a like or a comment and let me know if there's any other cities or areas that you would like to see a similar analysis done for. I can do this for any location in the United States. Until next time, this is Nick from ReVenture Consulting signing off.